News, the Supreme Court has ruled that it is illegal for employers to fire people because they are gay or transgender. The LGBTQ community and its supporters celebrated this decision as a monumental step toward equal rights. And Jan Crawford has been following this case and covers the Supreme Court for us. Jan, a lot of people did not see this coming. It was said that you could be married on Sunday and then fired on Monday. But with this ruling, that's no longer the case.
Well, that's right, Tony, and this was a stunning outcome to many people. The first major gay rights decision for this new conservative Supreme Court. Two of the court's conservatives, Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Neil Gorsuch, siding with the court's four liberals for the 6-3 ruling, which was written by Justice Gorsuch. In it, he says that the 1964 Federal Civil Rights Act used broad language to make it illegal for employers to rely on sex in their hiring or firing decisions. Now, in a dissenting opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote that the responsibility to expand the law should belong with Congress and not the Supreme Court. But then he went on to write that the decision represented a, quote, important victory achieved by gay and lesbian Americans. Now, before yesterday's ruling, only 22 states outlawed employment discrimination based on sexual orientation or a person's gender identity, and the ruling could affect the Trump administration's recent efforts to roll back protections for transgender people when they're seeking medical care. The administration is defining sex discrimination as, quote, what is determined by biology. But Justice Gorsuch is a really landmark opinion, leaves open some of those questions for another day, as well as how this ruling would affect religious employers. Gail?
Jan Crawford, it's so good to see you. One of the things I miss about this new normal we're navigating is you coming out in real time, giving us the Supreme Court decision, and doing it on the fly. That was always one of the highlights of the coverage that you give us. Thank you, Jan Crawford. Very good.
I don't know if I can keep my mouth shut the rest of my life about this.
Nearly 7 years ago, 59-year-old Amy Stevens was fired from her job as a funeral director, and she's been locked in a legal battle ever since.
Your life is what they are talking about in the Supreme Court of this country.
It is my life, but it's also a lot of other people's life.
In 2013, Amy told her boss at RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes in Garden City, Michigan, that she is transgender and planned to start coming to work dressed as a woman.
I wrote a letter. Dear friends and co-workers, what I must tell you is very difficult for me, and it's taking all the courage I can muster. I have a gender identity disorder.
Did you worry that it could mean the end of your job?
I knew it was a possibility, but I also knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing.
Amy grew up as Anthony and says she always felt different, but lived as a boy and even married. Donna says she didn't know about Amy's struggles until 10 years into their marriage.
How did you realize that there was something going on?
I could tell that Amy at that time was getting quieter.
I was scared to death that if I told her, I'd be out on the street.
Amy eventually told Donna the truth, and despite the initial shock, the couple remained married.
Did you grow suicidal?
Yes. I stood in the backyard with a gun to my chest. Within an hour, I realized I couldn't go through with it. I was important enough to keep going. And continuing on meant I had to come out.
Completely.
To the rest of the world.
After she was fired, Amy filed a sexual discrimination lawsuit. She argues Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protects her because it prohibits discharging an individual employee because of their sex.
Are they a man? Are they a woman? You can't determine gender except by asking that question.
Lawyers for Harris Funeral Home say what matters is the meaning of sex when Congress enacted the law.
All Americans should be able to rely on what the law says, not what someone would like it to be. It wouldn't have included anything having to do with gender identity or transgender status because those concepts weren't even in the American lexicon at that time.
Currently, 21 states have their own laws banning discrimination based on gender identity. If the justices agree with Amy, the protection will be expanded nationwide. This Supreme Court decision could come at any time. How do you feel about it?
We're going to keep fighting regardless of what the decision is.
More than 200 major U.S. and international corporations, including Comcast, NBC Universal, the parent company of NBC News, signed an amicus brief submitted to the court in support of Amy and 2 other LGBTQ cases before the justices. A decision could happen any day, but both sides believe it won't be announced until late spring.
You know, this is the same Supreme Court that a few years ago legalized same-sex marriage. This would seem to be on its face, perhaps, an open and shut case.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of issues. I think one of them, distinctively, is the fact that there are people arguing that the Civil Rights Act did not specifically protect transgender people, and that what the Supreme Court would be doing would be effectively rewriting that law if they did this. And you hear judges talk about how they don't want to legislate from the bench, that this should be a question for Congress. That is a bit of the tension that is playing out at the Supreme Court over this particular case.
And any day now we could hear a decision, or?
Any day. I mean, that's the, you know, the history of the Supreme Court, that
So
we wait for them.
Like so many cases before the High Court, will come down between those who view the document itself as some sort of living, breathing thing, and some who view it as an evolving word.
Yep, and it will certainly be a lightning rod for the election.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yep.
Good story. Thank you, Stephanie. We'll be right back.
It's been a long time coming, but it still has an uncertain road ahead. The House of Representatives passed the Equality Act, giving equal protections for LGBTQ Americans. So what's in the bill? It modified the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964, expanding it to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The Supreme Court last year enshrined some protections based on sex in Bostock versus Clayton, but the Equality Act goes further. It means that a person can't be fired from a job because of their sexual orientation, can't be denied service at a hair salon because they are transgender, nor can a same-sex couple be skipped over for an apartment lease because of their relationship. Representative David Cicilline, a Rhode Island Democrat and one of a few openly gay House members, says this legislation is long overdue.
The fight for civil rights and equality has been a long struggle for many communities in our country, and we've made progress each generation. And we knew, even with the Republican-controlled Congress who opposed the Equality Act, that we had to lay the groundwork and begin to really move public opinion as part of our strategy. And the good news is recent polling shows 83% of Americans support non-discrimination protections for the LGBTQ community. A majority of voters in every single state support the same. So we've made real progress. Frankly, it's time for Congress to catch up to the country on this issue, but we knew that this was an important part of our work.
So why is this controversial? Well, not all lawmakers are on board. Opponents say that this violates religious freedom and gives transgender athletes the upper hand in women's sports. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is one of most Republicans who oppose.
Very clear. I mean, if you look at Biden's appointments to cabinet members, suing nuns and others, this really seems like an onslaught against freedom of religion for girls' sports as well and others. And now the Democrats even taken it further.
The political difference played out in the halls of Congress, literally. When Democratic Representative Marie Newman, whose child is transgender, put up a transgender flag outside her door, Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene put up her own sign. There are only 2 genders, it says. So how likely is this to become law? The House passed the measure once before in the last Congress. But it didn't go anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate and with a Republican president who rolled back rights for LGBTQ Americans. President Joe Biden is supportive and willing to sign the Equality Act into law, but it's not guaranteed it reaches his desk. In the Senate, if all Democrats support, they still need 10 Republicans. and as of now, none have signed on.
Yeah, Allison, detectives with the LAPD confirmed this is an active investigation. They are searching for that shooter. No suspects have been listed at this point. Here's what happened. It's about 9:40 last night in Hollywood. Lady Gaga's dog walker was walking Lady Gaga's 3 French bulldogs when a car with unknown assailants pull up. They shoot the dog walker. They take 2 of the 3 dogs. We're told the 3rd dog is escaped, was recovered by Lady Gaga's team. Police, again, searching for the shooter in this case. They have not listed or found any suspects. Are tracking the car, what appears to be in part of the video that they've recovered from the scene, and are attempting to hunt down whoever this was. Meanwhile, we're hearing the pop star is beside herself, extremely upset. She's offered a $500,000 no strings attached reward for the safe return of her 2 French bulldogs, which are obviously so dear to her in this case. The dog walker, meanwhile, thankfully, the best news we can report is that it sounds like the dog walker is expected to make a recovery, but this remains an active investigation with the LAPD as they try to track down who did this. Back to you.
How important is this shift now to really focusing on centers like this versus some of the bigger mass vaccination sites in the state?
Yeah, it's what I've been calling the hub and spoke model that we need to think about. So you need these mass vaccination sites, which are the hubs, to do the high volume vaccinations. And then we're the spokes on that wheel that could really get into these communities, provide local services with people that people recognize and people can relate to. I think one of the important things is be patient. I think we're going to see a flood of people coming in who are going to be the yeses, and that's great. But then there's a large portion of this population who are really going to be on the fence, and maybe a soft no or maybe a hard no. And I think we have to make sure that we maintain the capacity and make sure that the vaccine's available for as we're getting this information out and we're talking to the residents of this community. And when they say yes, we have to be open and available and make sure that we get those vaccines in people's arms.
When it comes to the undocumented community here who are so vulnerable, but they might be intimidated by seeing National Guard here, what has been the calculation when it comes to that?
Yeah, it was one of the things we were concerned about when the state offered the National Guard to us. But working with our board of directors and other community partners, they really helped us with developing social media posts and other ways to communicate that these National Guards men and women are really here to help this community, and they're not serving in any particular government role, and they're not here to check any immigration status. And many of them come from the community as well, so they speak the language and they know the culture and they know the unique circumstances that our patients are in. But I reminded them of that, and I told them make sure we give them the best customer service that we could possibly give them, and of course smile with your eyes.
Even under the mask.
Even under the mask.
Oh, smile with the eyes, even under the mask. Dasha joining us now from Boston. Dasha, tell us more about the biggest roadblocks health officials and places like this are dealing with as they try to get minorities vaccinated and get to populations that are just being left out here.
Hey, Allison, we're coming to you from a very windy day here in East Boston. And look, the answer to your question is not a simple one, and that is part of the challenge, right? These communities, they differ greatly from zip code to zip code. We saw that firsthand yesterday when we visited several different centers in different neighborhoods, and that's really why these community health centers are looking to take the lead. These are hyper-local institutions that reflect the communities and the people that they serve. They've been ingrained here for decades now. They've basically been like the Swiss Army knives of healthcare and information here. So they feel like they can really help with that confidence issue, the issue of trust with a lot of these communities, that they want more information, but they want it from people that they know, from people that they can relate to. Manny Lopes, who heads up the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, we were with him yesterday, and he was recognized on just about every street corner. These centers are also deploying what they call vaccine street teams, folks who are going out, talking to their neighbors and really having that one-on-one conversation to better understand the concerns. I want you to hear from one of those individuals. This is Sandra. She is going out into the neighborhood, listening to her neighbors. Take a listen to some of what she had to say.
So some of the concerns that I hear so for folks who don't speak, English is not the first language, I am finding that there's a lot of fear regarding the vaccination and how that information is going to get transferred to government agencies, how that information is going to get utilized. But on the other hand, for English-speaking folks, I'm finding that there's just a lot of fear and mistrust about the process, specifically around how quickly the vaccine was developed. So a lot of the feedback that I get is, I want to wait. I don't want to be the first in line.
So they can really understand what the fears are, so they can help bridge those gaps and break down those barriers. But Allison, aside from the confidence issue and the trust issue, there are also systemic problems that predated COVID-19 that have now been exacerbated. For example, life expectancy. One of the neighborhoods we were in yesterday, Roxbury, has a life expectancy of 59 years. So when you look at eligibility, that's for 65 plus, you're missing a whole lot of vulnerable folks there, Allison. These are the things that the leaders here really want thought about more. They want more attention paid to these sorts of issues in the vaccine strategy going forward here. Allison.
Really important stuff, Dasha, in a very windy Boston, Massachusetts, but I'm glad to see you don't have gloves on. That means it's pretty warm in Boston for this time of year.
That was a mistake. I shouldn't have had gloves on, Allison.
Oh, no. All right, get inside and get warm. Dasha, thank you.
See you soon.
Allison, it's Thursday, so you know that means the weekly jobless report. And in the last week, we saw over 700,000 Americans file for new unemployment claims. And I know on its face that's a big number, but you've got to put it in perspective. Analysts were expecting over 800,000. And the even better news, the trend has been going down. Why? COVID. We always have to remember it's a health crisis tied to an economic crisis. And as the COVID numbers are going down across the country and more people are getting vaccinated, we're seeing jobs come back. We're seeing businesses reopen and do more business. Think travel, leisure, hospitality. A lot of those industries are opening up again. And that means we're seeing more hiring. And while we haven't seen President Biden's next stimulus package go through yet, it's inching closer and closer. And if it does, that will mean more money in the pockets of some of the lowest income Americans. It'll mean more support to businesses so they will be able to expand and hire more. Those are two very positive things possibly in the pipeline. And today, in the immediate wages front, we saw good news from Costco announcing they will be raising the wages of their lowest wage workers to $16 an hour. So while the debate is still going on in Washington whether to raise federal minimum wage, we are seeing some major companies. I mean, Costco has 180,000 employees. That's a lot of people you're going to see that are simply going to have more money to spend, and that money will go back in the economy. So it's a good news on the job front, on the overall economy, but we also have to remember recovery is a slow and long process. COVID isn't yet behind us, so we'll take this good news, but we're not going to the bank with it yet.
This is the American Law Journal.
Over 20 years ago, a Pennsylvania accountant is fired for one reason. He's gay. Could the same thing happen in the state of Pennsylvania today? Good evening. I'm Christopher Naughton. Welcome to the American Law Journal. Yes, a lot has changed since the early 1990s. Gay marriage is more widely accepted than before. The Senate has just passed a new bill known as ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. But make no mistake, if an employer across most of the country, across most of Pennsylvania, wants to fire someone because they're gay or bisexual or transgender, it's within their legal right to do so. The question is, for how long? Three guests weigh in tonight. Let's go ahead and meet them. Tony Haller joins us once again from Blank Rome. He heads up their labor and employment group. Blank Rome, a top 100 law firm across the nation. Chambers USA says he would be at the top of anyone's best litigators list. Dan Miller is with us this evening. He is a CPA and a former controller for the city of Harrisburg, also on the city council, but it was his firing from an accounting firm specifically because he was gay that set the Pennsylvania legal system on its ear. He eventually lost his case against his former employer, but he's continued to fight the fight against workplace discrimination now for 2 decades. And Angela Giampolo is with us tonight. The stars must have aligned. We had hoped to have her on the program many times in the past, but this is the date. She represents employees in age, race, sex discrimination, and retaliation matters, but also in matters including civil rights, sexual orientation, and gender identity. She is an active columnist for Philadelphia Gay News, and you can read her blog at phillygaylawyer.com. Dan, let's go to you. It was over 20 years ago that you were fired specifically and solely because you appeared on Harrisburg television talking about violence against gays in Harrisburg, and your employer fired you. The question I have for you today is, could the same thing happen in Pennsylvania the way the laws are written today?
Yeah, it could, because actually there's been no change in the law at all. And so it's perfectly legal to fire people because they're gay. We have had more ordinances in cities and municipalities that make it illegal. But actually, in my case, I lived in Harrisburg, and we had an ordinance at the time when I was fired, but I worked on the other side of the river in another county, and so it was perfectly legal for my employer to fire me. My employer did state under oath in the trial that he fired me because I'm gay, and solely because I'm gay, and also said I was the best employee he had at that time.
I think he also said at the time, I think in a deposition they asked him, was he a good employee, and he said not if he was homosexual.
I think he made that comment, yes.
All right, so what happened? Did you prevail at the trial level, and then you lost on appeal? What happened there? Because I think it did go up to the appeals court, and you lost 2-1.
We did, but we also lost at the trial level. Okay. And you have to remember it was 20 years ago, and it seemed as though the judge, the jury, et cetera, and the media were just blinded by the whole case about homosexuality, and we couldn't argue what I think the law is. I mean, it's sort of like today where there's no good rational argument on the other side, and so we see these marriage cases losing in state after state. But at that time, I don't think that the public and the court was open to hearing that there's no rational basis for discrimination.
Right, and you couldn't go to the EEOC, and there was no Pennsylvania Labor Relation Board or corollary. So you basically had no remedy. I think one of the jurors said, we would have liked to have found for Mr. Miller, but the law gave us no option.
Exactly.
So you were cornered in. I would have to think, Anthony and Angela, that if this case happened 20 years down the line, even though the law hasn't changed, as Dan Miller has said, I can't imagine an employer today saying, I fired him because he's gay.
I actually found out today that it was literally in his contract, and I asked Dan if he has the contract because I would like to see it, just for purely historical purposes for myself. But in the contract, it was defined as termination for cause if he found out that he was gay. It was literally in the contract that that is a potential termination for clause. You would never see that in a contract today. Absolutely not. So 20 years, later, I don't think the employer would have done it the same way. And thankfully, as Dan said, there have been ordinances passed all over Pennsylvania. We have up to 33 ordinances now in Pennsylvania that protect LGBT individuals, but there's 67 counties across Pennsylvania, so we're still at 34. And within Pennsylvania, we have 174,000 LGBT employees, most of which operating without any protections whatsoever.
I think that I would actually take issue that the law hasn't changed. I think that there has been an evolution of the law, which I can describe under federal law. So you start from the proposition that Title VII doesn't protect people against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. I think that's very clear. Right. Pennsylvania does not have a statute that does that. New Jersey does. And many states, about 20 states now, that protect against discrimination based on sexual orientation, and about 15 on transgender status. But if you think about federal law, it doesn't protect, but there was a Supreme Court case called Onkal. And Onkal was a decision by Justice Scalia, so you wouldn't think that he's somebody that would lightly tread into these issues. But the question there was that somebody on an oil rig had been very badly mistreated. It's not clear that he was homosexual. In fact, he probably wasn't, but he was treated as if he was. And there was some very ugly behavior, not only just taunting, but actually physical behavior. And Justice Scalia in that case said, just because it's male on male doesn't mean that there is no claim. Now, I don't think in that case, I think it's a much misunderstood decision. I don't think Justice Scalia was saying that would then open the door to claims that involve sexual orientation. But what he was saying is, look, we've accepted for a long time that you can have race discrimination by somebody of the same race or similar race, somebody of the same national origin.
Sure.
So this is just a natural extension of that proposition. Now that decision, though, has subsequently become extended to allow, and I won't say full protection for people who are, would be in a protected class if ENDA was passed or if we had proper protection, as some states do. But it does give some basis for protecting people in the workplace where they feel they're being treated badly, they're being harassed because of their sexual orientation.
Or the perception.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting study out of UCLA, the Williams Institute, which asked throughout the country a number of employers, people who were identified in the LGBT community, what their perception was of work and their experience at work. And the percentage of people who viewed themselves as harassed at work because of their gender identity was very significant. But people who said, I've been discriminated, like in Dan's case, fired, it was a very small percentage. So I think that the issues largely come up in the way people are perceived and treated in the workplace.
Right, and that goes across the age, race, sex, gender discrimination matters. I mean, often it's a matter of perception, whether that person is in a protected class or not. I'd have to think, Angela, that even though Pennsylvania hasn't changed their laws, as you said, even though Anthony, but because of what Anthony is saying, that the field has shifted, I would have to think that creative lawyering would be called to task. So if a Dan Miller suffered the same fate that he suffered 22 years ago, even though you don't have a specific statute in Pennsylvania, come on, there's got to be something else there, whether it's intentional infliction of emotional distress, there's got to be some sort of tort, some sort of retaliation. You would think that a lawyer would have a lot more in his holster if he had to fight that fight today for Dan Miller.
I'd agree with you, but at first I would like for the laws to be uniform and so that I don't have to get creative.
I get that, I get that. I
At the end of the day,
understand
if gay law were straight law and straight law were gay law, then I could use my creative lawyering for better purposes. But until that point, I think creative lawyering is what led us to use the Onicle case for, instead of sexual orientation, gender stereotyping is the term that allows us to latch on to the Onicle case that Anthony mentioned. So that was creative lawyering that has happened over the last 20 years. But the gender stereotyping is the key. So the things that are not protected is Dan's, being fired for being gay, right? Anything that is purely based on your sexual orientation. And the case law says it has to be fairly graphic, continual slurs, not just utterances, right? And what does that even mean? If I say something under my breath just a couple of times, as opposed to the Onicle situation, which was a couple of years and over, and some of the worst things that you'd ever heard. So there's an egregious level that you have to meet if you want to latch on to Title VII.
And Dan, did you suffer any other kind of slurs or what would be today considered a hostile working environment if there were such protections for sexual orientation? Or did that really not come about?
No, it was a professional office, and we were, working in a professional manner, so there wasn't that type of slur or anything like that.
And in those days, too, people often kept to themselves and didn't say anything, and you probably were not, offering any information. You were just going about doing your job.
That's correct.
You were going to say.
It's so frustrating that on a daily basis, every other day, and I have 5 consultations scheduled next week with potential clients with cases like this, and the first thing that I have to ask, or my assistant has to ask, is, which county do you live in, right? It's this patchwork of laws around the county, and how Bucks defines LGBT discrimination may be different than how Montgomery defines it.
Let's make this very clear for the viewer tonight, because they may not understand that even though Pennsylvania has not adopted any law dealing with sexual orientation discrimination or gender identity, a lot of cities have done that. A lot of municipalities have done that.
There are actually 33 municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania
33
that have adopted,
across,
including Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
Gotcha. Right. So if one of your clients lives in those areas, even though Pennsylvania hasn't passed a law, those municipalities have, and you can evoke the laws of those municipalities. I just wanted to make that clear, just in case people don't understand
that. And then HB 300 is the legislation that has been in the works and is in the works that would give us statewide protection. And we have 29 states, currently 33 states if you're transgender, where you could be fired for being gay. And Pennsylvania is one of those. But there is legislation in the works, and for Pennsylvania, hopefully I'm thinking within the next year to 3 years, depending on governor turnover or not administration-wise. But so there's definitely hope. But right now we're dealing with patchwork, non-uniformity, and people move. You know, someone asked me, you know, all the big cities have protections. What difference does it make? Well, in this mobile and global world, I've moved, you know, 8 times in the last 15 years. Do I have to look at exactly where I'm going to move in the United States to see if whether I live authentically as an out human being, if I'm going to be protected?
Dan Miller worked in Harrisburg, but I mean, he was working in Camp Hill. He lived in Harrisburg. You were going to say, Anthony.
Well, I think what's interesting is that actually, maybe surprisingly to some viewers, employers are really out ahead of this issue because, I wouldn't say all, but many sophisticated employers have policies that expressly prohibit, under their internal policies, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, marital status, and gender identity.
Can I just respond to that?
Jump in here on that? Because, yes, go
ahead, Dan. You know,
fire
first.
Yeah, I'm from Harrisburg, and when this happened, it was, I had a lot of personal resources of support that was good for me. But what happened was it was a lot of publicity, and I got a lot of phone calls from people who didn't live even in Harrisburg, but lived out further in the country. Or those are the places that really need it. Yes, a lot of big employers have it, but it's the small employers, the medium employers. And these were very sad stories to me because these were people who were being harassed or were fired. And what were they going to do? They were making a little bit over minimum wage. They didn't have good resources. They had to take it. They couldn't go out and hire an attorney. And another thing I was thinking of when I was listening to Angela, I didn't have Angela to turn to 25 years ago. The lawyers that I did use, they weren't steeped and really skilled in this type of an issue. We didn't have
it was a new issue, Dan, at the time. I mean, it really hadn't come up.
Exactly. So things have changed, and so if you're talking about lawyers that are going to get creative, I think they could do a lot better job now because we've talked about it. It's a big issue, and people have thought about it.
Well, that's what I wanted, to sort of try and make as the point that I think many big employers accept that this is something that should be prohibited. The ender is stuck in Congress because it's not going to get through the House anytime soon.
Right.
Boehner has made that pretty clear.
Sure.
But
even Obama is not really out in front of it.
We have 24 million small businesses that make up 55% of the workforce. So Anthony's absolutely correct that 96% of all Fortune 100 companies have gone ahead of the government, which is sad because we actually elect legislatures to protect us, but governments and municipalities have done it themselves. But the majority of the workforce, my firm is under 15. I could, even if ENDA were to pass, it exempts employers of under 15 people and W-2 people. With Obamacare and the increase in benefits, people are moving towards 1099s. And they wouldn't even count as 15 employees, so you need 15 true W-2 employees for this to even apply to you. And there are 27 million businesses that, including my own, where I could discriminate. So Fortune 100, they look bad. It's bad taste if you aren't on the right side of this issue. It's not even a congratulations anymore. It's who are these 4% and let's go find them and make fun of them. But the other 96 are normal at this point.
Well, part of that's just a recognition of the need to be in a position to recruit people and be hospitable to people of, all kinds of gender identity.
Right,
so,
exactly.
I think big employers have worked that out and that it's a good thing. And so it's very accepted. And I think the courts have tried. Actually, this is an area where I think the courts have been more open to find ways to address some of the things that are perceived wrongs in the workplace against the gay community. I really do. And so I want to be clear that the viewers understand that what's happened after this Supreme Court case that we've mentioned on Carl is that the courts have latched on to an early case that was a sex discrimination case, Pricewaterhouse versus Hopkins. And in that case, she was a fairly senior person at Pricewaterhouse. And her claim was, I'm not getting promoted, I'm being discriminated because I'm perceived as not being male enough, right? And so people don't see me as that stereotype of of what they would expect from, you know, somebody at this level in the corporation. I'm too female, I want to collaborate, I'm not aggressive enough, and those kind of things. So what the courts have done is taken that concept and said, if you have somebody who is a member of the LGBT community at the work, and people start making fun of them because the male is effeminate and they don't like the way, you know, he acts in the workplace, and they start making jokes about him, that can create an environment which falls into that kind of stereotyping. And then if that's connected to a termination decision, and I realize this isn't Dan's case, which was much more direct and overt,
yes,
then there is recourse. So I don't want people thinking there is no recourse. I think the courts have really developed a strain of law that does provide some protection.
Well,
the recourse could be better.
Absolutely.
And that's really the point that the viewers
Yeah.
should take. Your point is a little diluted. You know, I want the same law as you, so I don't want the viewers thinking, oh, what's Angela and Dan complaining about? They have recourse.
No, and
we deserve.
And we know the laws sometimes evolve slowly,
and because it wouldn't protect Dan's situation, and I think that's wrong. I mean, I think we all agree.
ENDA as it stands, you know, to really get into ENDA, and which I call Splenda, because it's so light on any real protection that I don't even know why we're taking it. And it won't even pass, as we were talking about earlier.
Well, I won't get through the House.
Yeah,
we know that.
yeah.
We understand that.
But so, and just to comment on that, yes, there is recourse, but it's 2014. We have deserved for a long time the same rights as everyone else to be a part of this protected class.
And you would think, Anthony, because you've handled these kind of cases where there is same-sex on same-sex discrimination and harassment. So you would think if the courts are able to handle that they can take that further step. I understand it's not legislative protection, but the courts have, is what you're saying.
Angela's right. There's this huge gap. So the courts will accept if somebody has a sexual desire towards you, and that's exhibited. So it's like what we used to call quid pro quo harassment. You know, I'm
sleep with me.
Males.
You've got the promotion.
I'm attracted to you, and yes. That would be recognized, even though that might be in a lesbian or homosexual relationship.
Right.
So that would be great. And then the second strain is that they recognize this concept of if you're stereotyping people, if you have this view of how a female should be or a male should be, and that's what's happening in the workplace, that can provide a basis for liability. What's missing, the huge gap, is where you say this is because you're gay, or because you're bisexual, or because you're a transgender person. And if you come out and just say that, which is Dan's case, and that's the reason, and there's nothing else around it, you're not stereotyping, there's no sexual desire involved, that's the gap in the law, and it needs to be fixed.
Let me take a quick look at the curiosity that is Pennsylvania. It's paradoxical because Pennsylvania became the first state to ban public sector employment discrimination based on sexual orientation in 1975, the last century, deep into the last century. But Pennsylvania is the only northeastern state that doesn't acknowledge either same-sex marriage or civil unions. Pennsylvania is the only northeastern state without sexual orientation, gender identity protections in the workplace. And 33 municipalities across Pennsylvania protect LGBT people from discrimination. So this bill, 300, has been kind of languishing, I think, in both houses. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, do you know about this? Does this go back to 2012 or 2013 when at least one of these bills were introduced?
Well, I'm not sure exactly when they were introduced. I mean, these bills have been around for 25 or 30 years.
They have been, right?
We've been working on these, and we're getting more people. But, our legislature is just, antiquated. There's some Neanderthals in there that want to stop us at every point. And so until we get enough legislators, and I think the public is already there, and they've been with us on employment non-discrimination for decades, actually. It's 80-90%, I think, in polls that say that this is wrong, and yet our legislature refuses to act.
And this is HB 300 and SB 300. It would ban discrimination on sexual orientation and gender identity grounds or expression. Statewide, in employment, housing, credit, and public accommodations, LGBT citizens could not be fired, denied a mortgage, or refused a hotel room based on that status. And over 100 legislators from both the Republican and Democratic parties are supporting the bill. So this really goes far beyond the workplace.
It really does go far beyond the workplace. And in Pennsylvania, we'll likely get gay marriage before we get employment discrimination.
There's irony
and the irony there is, you know, Dan and his partner could put in for they get married, and they put in for their gay honeymoon. So now they're actually allowed to get married in Pennsylvania, but they submit for their 2 weeks for their gay honeymoon, and they get fired for being gay. And that is likely going to be the chronology of what happens here in Pennsylvania. That's how backwards it is. And also, you know, I read this statistic the other day, 9 out of 10 Americans don't even know that LGBT individuals are not protected. They don't even know. I was on a panel with an African American.
They may not know that they're protected.
Right. They may not know a lot of things.
Right.
What's that show? The second grade where fifth graders.
I think there is an assumption that the federal law covers.
I was on a
sexual
panel
orientation.
with an African American PhD professor, okay, lesbian, and we're on an equality panel. And she did not know that she could be denied public accommodation or denied a hotel room if we held hands walking into one of the 34 other counties.
Angela, if you know that the Governor Corbett, who was our Attorney General, doesn't know that we're covered, that we're not covered under civil rights law. He just said that in a few months ago.
Right. Our own governor, as Dan said, did not know that we are his people, his constituents, the 174,000 LGBT individuals, did not have protections.
Well, this House bill, again, 300 and Senate Bill 300, is getting a lot of backing from the corporate community. PNC Financial Services announced their support recently, and there's a list of some others. So now Angela would say, well, you know, better late to the party than never. Anthony, you might say that corporations decided, heck, if the government's not going to take action, we are.
Well, I think that's what I was alluding to earlier. I think many corporations, because they see value to diversity in the workplace, have said, we're going to invest in diversity, we're going to invite it, we're going to recruit based on it. And so I think big corporations are accepting. I totally accept the proposition that in smaller businesses that the sort of social acceptance has not caught up to the situation in big companies.
Right. Dan, I know you can't do this, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. Let's say the same thing happened to you today that happened 22 some odd years ago. What do you think the outcome would be, given that the law is still the same?
It is a great question to ponder, because I do think we've changed so much in society, and I think that maybe the court would find a way to rule in my favor. As you said, the jury wanted to rule for me, but if you knew that trial and you listened to the instructions that the judge gave to the jury right before they went in to decide, right then I knew that I wasn't going to win because of the way he gave those instructions. And maybe the judge would give the instructions in a different way, the outcome would be different. I do want to mention something that about Anthony, what he was saying is that, you know, maybe it would be great to go to his law firm and file a claim, but not everybody can do that. And I think most people can't do that. And that's why we need this law change. We need the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission to be able to go to bat for people who can't maybe afford to go to, you know, a big law firm or have those resources, because it's not just happening to people that can afford good representation. We need everybody to be able to have access to some way to counteract this type of discrimination.
I think today what would have happened in Dan's case is that the lawyers would have been more sophisticated because the law is more developed. They would have been searching for evidence of actions or activities in the workplace that preceded the termination decision. There's a Third Circuit case, Prowell, recently where this exact happened, where somebody pinned an ad for male-on-male sort of want ad. And that sort of outed the person, and then people started sort of teasing him and making fun of him, and then subsequently was terminated. And so the lawyers would be searching for that kind of evidence that preceded the termination. Mm-hmm. And I think if that evidence existed, it might be in emails, it might be in other forms of text messages, that kind of thing, on social media, look for that kind of evidence, and then I think the courts would be receptive, because I think the courts want to find a way to thread the needle.
But do I have anything to send Anthony a subpoena with? No. Hence why HB 300 exists, because I have a ton of amazing cases in New Jersey, and JLAD gives me all the teeth I need.
Since 1990, New Jersey had law against discrimination.
Absolutely. So I'm constantly suing in New Jersey, his New Jersey office, but Anthony and I don't get to spar too often because there's nothing here in Pennsylvania. And a federal ENDA would at least give me that while we wait for Pennsylvania to catch up.
Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and many other municipalities. I hear what you're saying. It's not pervasive across the state. Dan, maybe also, let's leave it at this. Perhaps if a jury heard your case today, they might wade into an area of jury nullification. We don't care what the law says. This is what we think is right and just. Could have happened.
It could have happened on many grounds. I mean, not only was I fired, my employer sued me. I didn't sue him because we didn't have any basis to do that. And he sued me on a non-compete clause that was tremendously overbroad and is used as an example in law textbooks as an overbroad case. So there were many ways that it could have come down in my favor. But again, I think the whole notion of homosexuality 25 years ago, it was very different than it is today. People are out, people know gays and lesbians, they know we're just regular, normal people, and it doesn't have the taboo that it did back then, and I think that was the whole crux of why I lost.
One thing we haven't discussed, which is retaliation, which we should always do in this context. And I do think because employers have policies and because people can then bring claims under those policies, and if you make the right claim under the policy, if you're advised well, and say, I believe that I am being discriminated against or harassed because of gender stereotyping, right? Then you are protected by the retaliation provisions of the Civil Rights Act. And then if you're fired, then you have a real claim.
We'll just have to do another show.
Exactly.
I want to thank my three guests for joining me tonight. Anthony Haller, defense attorney, corporate defense counsel for Blank Rome in Center City, Philadelphia. Dan Miller joining us tonight. Again, he was fired 20 years ago simply because he told his boss that he was gay, and continues his fight against workplace discrimination, as does Angela Giampolo with the Giampolo Law Group in Philadelphia. Read some of her columns in Philadelphia Gay News or at phillygaylawyer.com. For all of us here at the American Law Journal, I'm Christopher Norton. Thank you for joining us this week. Till next week, case closed.
This week's American Law Journal has been made possible in part by Blank Rome, providing strategic advice for employers in today's workplace. Scheller PC, protecting consumer rights since 1977. And The Legal Intelligencer, the nation's oldest legal newspaper for lawyers.
Hello, my name is Harry Turner. I'm the CEO of Diverse Counseling Solutions. It's a private practice located in Baton Rouge, here in Baton Rouge, 70816 zip code. And I was asked, as a favor, to answer a few questions, concerns that Cappy may have regarding LGBTQ flags and magazines and how it would be received by non-LGBTQ clients. So let me say that I am, clearly I'm an African-American male, just in case you ain't realized, I'm black. But besides that, I'm also a cisgendered Christian male, black male. My father is actually the pastor and has been a pastor of a church for many years, and of course we understand that there's still a lot of reconciliation that needs to be done between vulnerable populations such as the LGBTQ community as well as religious communities, and continues to be. But with that being said, about losing clients and y'all's concerns, I don't mean to, so let me just be professional about this first. Client-clinician match is the number one the number one factor when it comes down to client improvement, client-clinician match. So you want somebody who is a match. You want clients that really match and mesh well with your frequency. With all that being said, for me to get into my office, for me to excel and step out on my own, I had the wonderful pleasure of this angel coming along, and they asked me not to say anything about it, so I'm not going to mention the name, but this angel came along and allowed me to use their office until I got on my feet. And for 1 year, when they were not in their office, I used their office. They had LGBTQ flags and other representations, all in symbolic representations, all in the office. I never really paid much attention to it. You know, I thought it was kind of cool, to be honest with you. It was really, you know, like the swag. It was a very soothing swag to have that in there. But as far as clients and losing clients is concerned, I don't think I lost any clients from that. I don't recall having lost any clients from that. If anything, it made clients feel more comfortable, regardless of their belief and background, because they saw the LGBTQ flag as something that represented my openness, you know, my willingness to accept all people, you know, regardless of creed, race, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth, you know. So actually, I think that it benefited me to get off the ground, because I was building my clientele during that time, and I think it actually helped me to build my clientele faster with having those symbolic representations representing equality from specifically the LGBTQ community. Now, with that being said, I know it's supposed to only be 1 or 2 minutes, Cappy, but I'm gonna say I got to say this real quick. It's gonna be 5 minutes, whatever. So just play the whole video. So just know this: that if you are rejected, these concerns about losing clients behind having LGBTQ flags and representations in the office, if you do lose clients because of that, good for you. Because again, like I said, the number one factor when it comes down to client improvement, last I researched, was the client-clinician match. And so if you lose a client because you have LGBT flags in your office, then those are clients that need to be lost. And you didn't lose, you gained. You stop seeing a loss as a loss as opposed to actual is benefiting you, because sometimes rejection is there so that you can be protected. Sometimes rejection is there for our protection. Some people you don't want as clients. I'm letting you know right now. And there was another point that I wanted to make there, that we don't take any losses. We take lessons and blessings, you know. And so actually I have gratitude for any of the clients, and I haven't lost any clients behind having an LGBTQ flag in my office when I was using someone else's office, my angel office. I can't say the name, even though I almost said Cappy. Oops. I never lost any clients behind that. You know, it enhanced it actually enhanced my practice. But besides that, whoever was turned away from it, I actually was blessed. If I never noticed it, first off, and I was blessed that they got turned away, because that was going to not end up as therapeutic, I should say, as it could be. And you definitely want to think about the wellness of anybody who walks in the office. Now, consider this though: when they first walk in your office, they're not technically your client. You know, they're not client until they sign that paperwork, you know. And even then, after initial assessment, you still have an opportunity to decide whether this is a good match, a good fit, you know. And if not, you just refer them to somebody else. But you want clients that match your frequency, you know. Hopefully that answers all your questions. But look, y'all are going to be great clinicians. Even asking that question, to be concerned about that, when in reality, I know y'all want to say, forget them. You know, to put it pleasantly, to even ask that question speaks to y'all's level of maturity and awareness, and that there are people out there with different understandings and perspectives of life. Sometimes those perspectives are in opposition to our own, but y'all are seeking to be accepting of all people, which is what our profession calls us to be. And so I applaud you for that. But as far as losing clients, don't see it as a loss. See it as a gain. That's all I got to say to that.
Hi, my name is Allison Pardue. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. My primary place of practice right now is at the Baton Rouge General, where I am a therapist for the employees of the hospital. I just wanted to send you a brief message to show you I have this tiny little office here. My desk is sort of in front of me, and as you can see, right by my front door, or the door to my office, I have some flags hanging as well as a safe zone printout, and I have had that up for probably 2 years or more now, and I have never had a client complain or express any particular thoughts or feelings about it, other than some brief noticing of it and maybe some appreciation or acknowledgement that those were there. And I am a straight cisgender person, and so just wanted you to know that it has so far been no problem for me, and has not created any barriers between me and any of my clients. Okay, that's all. Bye.
Hello, Cappy's class. My name's Robin Gilmore. I'm a trauma-focused therapist in the Port Allen area. I work primarily in a school-based setting with teenagers. She told me that one of the concerns that the class members have had is how to decide whether or not to display LGBTQ materials in your office, and if it's going to be off-putting to other clients, and if that's a problem. I have, of course, you know, as a cisgender straight therapist who's white, I've thought a lot about this because I think it's really important that you're purposeful in what you do as a therapist. I actually have a wall of flags in my office, you know, the trans flag, the bi flag, the gay flag. There's a whole bunch of them, the asexuality flag. The reason that I think it's really important is because of our code of ethics. You know, one of the things that we're supposed to be doing as social workers is doing social justice, social outreach to minority populations. And so there are fewer safe spaces for people in the LGBTQ population. And so for me, it's most important to have a safe space for those people because there are fewer options for them. And so as a practitioner, I need to make sure that they have a safe space in my office, or as safe as I can make it. Another thing that's really important is that it opens up the conversation for people who might be uncomfortable with that. And I've definitely had some, you know, it's the Port Allen area, I've had some teenagers who have expressed some concern or confusion about it. And what it actually does is open up a conversation for why I have it there. And you know, there's always space in my office for people to have different beliefs than me, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to change what kind of space my office is going to be. I hope this is helpful, and good luck.